You know, usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, yeah, like structural engineering or something.
Exactly. It operates almost like structural engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged, undeniable white line, and the doctor just points to the screen and says, well, there it is. That's the
In fact,
problem.
it's totally binary. I mean, you either have a fractured radius or you don't.
Right.
The causal link between your pain and the physical reality is just visible. It's quantifiable. And we actually find an immense amount of psychological comfort in that visibility, you
I
know?
really do. But then um, you step into the world of our internal lives, right? Our
Yeah.
emotional well-being. And suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Oh, totally useless.
Yeah, it's like we are looking at this emotional landscape that is so murky and complex and incredibly nonlinear. I mean, there is no simple scan that tells you why you feel this lingering, heavy sense of exhaustion on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. Or why you feel entirely disconnected from your own life, even when, by all objective metrics, things are actually going remarkably well.
Right. Which is so confusing for people. And that brings us to the core of what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. We are looking at a stack of incredibly insightful sources today,
Yeah.
mostly focused on mindfulness, cognitive behavioral patterns, and the mechanics of emotional healing.
Yeah, and it's some really powerful material.
It really is. And as I was sifting through all this material, synthesizing the research and the philosophy, everything just kept converging on this one central anchoring thesis.
And it's a big one.
It is. The thesis is this: the more we expect life to be perfect, the harder it becomes to enjoy the life we already have.
It sounds deceptively simple on the surface, but when you actually look at the neurobiology and the psychology behind that statement, it is this profound deconstruction of how human beings basically manufacture their own suffering.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Manufacturing our own suffering.
Right. I mean, we are going to explore how the human brain functions as this massive, relentless anticipation machine, and how those rigid expectations, they secretly engineer our disappointment.
So for you listening right now, we really invite you to treat this deep dive as a moment of quiet time, like a space for healing, because we're going to look at how this cognitive rigidity damages our interpersonal relationships, how it weaponizes our own inner critic, and most importantly, how letting go is fundamentally different from just giving up.
That's a really crucial distinction. Yeah.
So I want to start by drilling down into this fascinating paradox that the source material highlights right away. It's a phenomenon I think almost everyone listening has experienced.
Oh, absolutely.
Why do we so often feel this low-level hum of disappointment or even like a sense of mourning when our lives are actually objectively fine?
Right. Like you have stability, you have shelter, you have community, but there's just this pervasive ambient dissatisfaction.
Yes, exactly. Where does that come from?
So, to understand that ambient dissatisfaction, we really have to look at how the brain processes reality. Because we tend to think of human suffering as something that happens when the environment becomes hostile.
Like
Right.
when there's a tangible threat or a catastrophic loss.
Exactly. But the research points out that a vast majority of our daily suffering isn't caused by reality being inherently cruel. It's actually caused by a sort of computational error in our own minds.
A computational error. That's interesting.
Yeah, so our brains operate on something called predictive processing. We don't just passively observe the world. We are constantly generating these incredibly detailed, high-resolution mental blueprints of what is going to happen next.
Oh, wow. So we're always kind of guessing the future.
More than guessing. We simulate the perfect morning routine, the trajectory of our careers, even the exact tone of voice our partner should use when we walk in the door.
Okay, so we are basically running a constant VR simulation in our heads of how reality should play out, and then we step out into the actual world and compare the two.
That is exactly it. And here's where the mechanism of disappointment kicks in. The brain relies on a system driven largely by dopamine.
Right, the pleasure chemical.
Well, we often call it the pleasure chemical, but it's actually deeply tied to what's called reward prediction error.
Reward prediction error. Okay, break that down for us.
So, when reality matches our internal blueprint, we feel stable. When reality exceeds our blueprint, which is pretty rare, we get a spike of dopamine. We feel joy.
Okay, that makes sense.
But when reality falls short of that rigid, detailed simulation, even by just a tiny millimeter, we experience a dopamine dip. And that dip doesn't just feel like a neutral observation. The brain registers it as a loss. It literally registers it as a failure.
Oh, wow. This makes so much sense because it explains why the pain feels so disproportionate to the event.
Yes.
It's like why you
Yeah.
can have a great vacation, but if the hotel room doesn't have the specific view you pictured in your head for 6 months, you spend the first 2 days feeling genuinely frustrated.
Right. You aren't mourning the view. You are mourning the death of the simulation you created.
We're mourning the simulation. That hits so hard.
And if we look at the historical and cultural context we are operating in right now, this problem is being violently exacerbated by modern society.
Oh, for sure. Everything is about wanting more.
Exactly. We are living in an era of hyper-optimization. I mean, the Industrial Revolution and later the Digital Revolution, they didn't just change our technology, they changed our cognitive baseline.
Because we're constantly bombarded with external models of perfection now, right?
Yes, curated lifestyles, optimized productivity hacks, algorithmic representations of success. The message is relentless. You should always be upgrading.
Everything.
Right. Your relationships should mirror cinematic romance. Your career should be this unbroken upward trajectory. Your body should literally defy aging.
It is the ultimate hedonic treadmill, but it's like supercharged.
Yeah.
If you get the promotion, the baseline immediately shifts.
Yeah.
And now you need to make partner. If you buy the house, the baseline shifts to remodeling the kitchen. The goalpost doesn't just move, it's basically strapped to a high-speed rail.
And this creates a severe cognitive distortion. When your baseline for a normal, acceptable life is culturally calibrated to be a state of flawless, continuous optimization, then your baseline becomes statistically unattainable.
Right. It's impossible.
It is. So every single day becomes an exercise in measuring the delta between the impossible standard and your messy, chaotic reality.
Okay, let me push back here for a second, because I think there is a critical distinction we're kind of dancing around.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we accept that constant expectation leads to a dopamine deficit and persistent dissatisfaction, aren't we flirting with nihilism a bit?
That's a fair question.
Because I look at human history, and it seems to me that the refusal to accept reality as it is, this sheer stubborn expectation of something better, is the exact engine of human progress.
Right, the drive for innovation.
Yeah. Like, if early humans didn't expect a better standard of living, we wouldn't have agriculture. If we didn't demand more from medicine, we wouldn't have antibiotics. So
Yeah.
how do we reconcile the need for a vision with this idea that expecting things to be perfect makes us miserable?
That is the essential tension right there. And honestly, it's a brilliant pushback. It is the most common defense mechanism the high-achieving mind uses to justify its own rigidity.
Okay, so how do we untangle that?
The distinction lies in the psychological difference between having a vision and holding a rigid expectation. The sources we are analyzing today, they don't suggest we abandon ambition. Not at all.
Okay, good.
They draw a very sharp line between what we might call hope or aspirational pursuit versus unrealistic, inflexible expectations.
So how do those two things operate differently at a mechanical level? Because culturally, we use those words almost interchangeably, right? We tell people to expect great things.
Mechanically, they are entirely different systems of engagement. Hope, or a healthy vision, is expansive. It's probabilistically open. It's a direction.
A direction, okay.
Right. You are saying, I am going to aim for this specific goal, say building a successful company or curing a disease, and I am going to apply massive effort to move in that direction. But I remain open to the friction of reality.
So you know it's not going to be a straight line.
Exactly. You accept that the timeline will change, the market will shift, and the process will be chaotic. That mindset allows for resilience.
So hope is basically a compass. It gives you a heading, but it doesn't promise you won't encounter a storm or have to navigate around a mountain.
Precisely. A rigid expectation, however, is a closed conditional system. It operates like a legal contract that you drafted in total isolation and then tried to force reality to sign.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
Right. You say, I put in 50 hours of work this week, therefore reality is obligated to give me exactly this outcome on this specific Tuesday without any complications.
And when reality breaks the contract, we lose it.
We completely lose it. The trap is tying your internal emotional regulation, your actual peace, to the external compliance of the universe.
That conditionality is just the poison in the well. It's this mindset of, I will only allow my nervous system to downregulate and feel safe when X, Y, and Z happen perfectly.
Exactly. If your prerequisite for emotional equilibrium is external perfection, you are setting yourself up for chronic psychological exhaustion. True peace requires this profound realization that our imaginations, no matter how detailed or noble, are not binding contracts.
Reality has no obligation to mirror your internal simulation.
It really doesn't. When you grasp that, you realize that the architecture of your disappointment is entirely self-constructed.
We are the architects. We draw the blueprint, hand it to the universe, and then throw a tantrum when the universe builds a slightly different house.
Yep.
And I want to take this concept of the mental blueprint
Mm-hmm.
and apply it to the one area where I think it causes the absolute most carnage: other human beings.
Oh, yeah. The relationship trap.
Exactly. Let's transition into that. Because it is one thing to be frustrated that your flight was delayed. It is a completely different level of psychological damage when we apply these rigid predictive models to our partners, our friends, and our children.
Absolutely. When we apply predictive processing to human relationships, expectation evolves from just an internal source of frustration into a mechanism of true interpersonal destruction.
Because people aren't predictable, right?
No, humans are incredibly complex, dynamic, open systems. But because our brains prefer cognitive ease, we try to reduce the people we love into static, predictable models. We basically write a script for them.
And the most insidious script, which the source material tackles head-on, is the expectation of telepathy, the mind-reading expectation.
Oh, this one is so common.
I have seen this destroy so many connections. It is this pervasive belief that, well, if they truly understood me, if they really loved me, they would just know what I need without me having to articulate it.
That specific expectation is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of theory of mind, which is our ability to attribute mental states to others. We have this romanticized, culturally reinforced notion that deep intimacy equals cognitive fusion.
Like we share a brain.
Right. We assume that because we share a life with someone, they suddenly have real-time access to our internal emotional dashboard.
Which they obviously don't.
They don't. So you come home after a brutal day at work feeling undervalued, and you expect your partner to immediately read your subtle physiological cues, interpret them correctly, and deliver the exact comforting response you simulated on your drive home.
And when they don't, when they just look up from chopping vegetables and say, hey, could you take the trash out? The reaction isn't just, oh, they didn't notice I'm sad.
No, it's way worse.
The reaction is, they don't love me. We completely catastrophize the failed expectation. We turn a lack of telepathy into lack of affection.
Because we have conflated compliance with our internal script with love. You are effectively casting the people in your life in a highly specific play, but you refuse to give them the script, and then you punish them for missing their cues.
That is, wow.
It is a form of emotional totalitarianism. You are demanding that they cease to be an independent consciousness and instead become an extension of your own needs.
Emotional totalitarianism. That is a brilliant way to phrase it. It really strips away that whole romantic veneer of the soulmate who finishes your sentences, and it reveals it as just a demand for control.
Exactly.
And I think this bleeds directly into another massive trap the sources identify, the expectation that people will remain static.
Oh, the static partner expectation, yes.
We fall in love with a 25-year-old and we secretly demand that they hold the exact same worldview, the exact same energy levels, and the exact same priorities when they are 25.
Which is a biological and psychological impossibility. I mean, the human brain literally changes physically over decades. We experience neuroplasticity driven by trauma, joy, new information, shifting hormonal landscapes.
We are constantly rewiring.
We are. So to demand that a partner or a friend never changes is to demand that they stop growing. It means you aren't actually loving the dynamic, breathing human being sitting across from you. You are loving a historical artifact.
A historical artifact.
Yeah, you are loving a frozen snapshot of who they were when they best served your narrative.
It's like we are trying to pin a butterfly to a corkboard, so it stays exactly where we want it. But in doing so, we kill the very thing that made it beautiful. Its ability to fly, to change, to surprise you.
That's a beautiful metaphor. And think about the sheer psychological weight of being the butterfly in that scenario.
It must be awful.
Being the person on the receiving end of those rigid expectations is exhausting. When you are constantly perceived through a distorted, demanding lens, your nervous system is always on high alert.
You start walking on eggshells.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You feel this ambient disapproval because you know subconsciously that you are continually failing an audit you never even consented to.
It creates this profound alienation. The tragedy is that by expecting our relationships to be this perfect, unchanging, mind-reading utopia, we actually engineer the exact resentment and distance we were afraid of.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It really is. So mechanically speaking, how do we dismantle this? Because saying just accept people as they are
Yeah.
sounds really nice on a bumper sticker, but, when your spouse is actively irritating you, it is incredibly difficult to do.
It requires a deliberate cognitive reframing of what a relationship actually is. You have to fire yourself as the director.
Okay, fire the director. I like that.
The sources emphasize that breathing easier in a relationship begins the exact moment you transition from an evaluative mindset to an observational mindset.
What does that look like in practice?
Instead of evaluating your partner against your internal script, asking, are they doing what I want? You observe them with genuine curiosity. You ask, who is this person today? How are they evolving?
Oh, I see. It is the difference between going to the theater to critique a performance versus going to a documentary just to learn about the subject.
Yeah. So, perfect analogy.
When you drop the expectation that your partner must fulfill every single emotional need, that they must simultaneously be your best friend, your intellectual equal, your financial co-manager, and your therapist, you suddenly create the space for them to just be a flawed, trying human being.
And paradoxically, that is when true intimacy actually happens, because they finally feel safe enough to take the armor off.
Wow, yeah. Intimacy cannot exist in an environment of constant evaluation. But this actually brings us to a crucial pivot point in the discussion, because as harsh and totalitarian as we can be with our partners, our friends, and our children.
The absolute most brutal dictator we will ever encounter is usually the one living inside our own heads.
Exactly, the inner critic.
Yeah.
The expectations we place on the external world, they pale in comparison to the crushing, unrelenting expectations we reserve for ourselves.
I'm so glad we are going here, because if we want to talk about manufacturing our own suffering, this is the factory floor.
It really is. The source material delves deep into this internal landscape, and it highlights these incredibly pervasive, heavy expectations we place on ourselves. And the one that screams the loudest, the one that I think basically defines modern anxiety, is productivity guilt.
Productivity guilt is the psychological internalization of the hyper-optimized society we were just talking about. But it is more insidious because we have moralized it.
Moralized it, right.
We no longer view productivity merely as a means to an end, like a way to secure resources. We view it as the sole metric of our existential worth. The rigid expectation is that you must operate with the relentless, unvarying efficiency of a machine.
And when you inevitably fail to be a machine, because, you are a biological organism subject to circadian rhythms, hormonal fluctuations, and emotional fatigue, you don't just feel tired. You feel like a bad person.
That is the moralization of the expectation. The internal script says, a successful, worthy person wakes up at 5 a.m., optimizes their macronutrients, crushes deep work for 8 hours, exercises, and maintains a perfectly curated personal life.
Which is just an insane standard.
It's impossible. Therefore, if you require a Sunday to just lie on the couch because your nervous system is completely fried, the inner critic interprets that rest not as a biological necessity, but as a moral failure.
It calls you lazy.
It tells you that you are falling behind in this invisible race.
I think about the evolutionary mismatch here a lot. I mean, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans worked in bursts. We hunted, we gathered, and then we just rested for days.
We were highly cyclical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The idea of sustained 40 to 60-hour-a-week cognitive output is an invention of the last few centuries. We are running software that demands perpetual motion on hardware that is literally designed for cyclical rest.
The mismatch is profound. And it generates another devastating expectation highlighted in the text, which is the belief that we must be strong, resilient, and emotionally impenetrable every single day.
Oh, this one is so incredibly heavy. The expectation of invulnerability. We demand that we process the grief of losing loved ones, navigate macroeconomic anxiety, manage complex family dynamics, and endure the baseline friction of existence, all without ever dropping the ball or showing a crack in the facade.
We demand emotional stoicism from a brain that is literally wired to feel fear, sadness, and overwhelm.
It's totally unfair to ourselves.
It is. And this creates a devastating secondary layer of suffering. In psychology, there is a concept regarding primary and secondary emotions.
Okay, tell us about that.
The primary emotion is the natural biological response. You experience a loss and you feel sad. That is clean pain. It hurts, but it processes.
Right.
The secondary emotion is how you feel about your feeling. Because of our rigid expectations, when we feel sad, we immediately feel ashamed of our sadness. When we feel overwhelmed, we feel anxious about being overwhelmed.
We weaponize our own humanity against ourselves. We literally get angry at ourselves for not being a robot.
We do.
And this constant self-flagellation is driven by a very specific cognitive habit that the source material names perfectly: the habit of measuring your life by what is missing.
Measuring your life by what is missing. That phrase is the perfect summation of the inner critic's operating system.
It really hits home.
It is deeply tied to our brain's negativity bias, which is the evolutionary trait that makes us hyper-focus on threats or deficits rather than successes.
Because noticing a deficit kept our ancestors alive.
Exactly. But in the modern world, this translates into a relentless fixation on the gap between our real self and our idealized perfect self.
Carl Rogers, the pioneer psychologist, he talked a lot about this, right? The idea of incongruence.
Yes, classic psychology.
The wider the gap between the person you actually are and the ideal self you think you should be, the more psychological distress you experience.
Precisely. Measuring your life by what is missing means you reach the end of the day and your brain immediately scans past everything you actually accomplished.
It completely ignores the fact that you showed up for your job, you navigated a difficult conversation with grace, you fed yourself, and you simply survived.
All of those data points are just discarded.
Right. The brain zeroes in exclusively on the 3 uncompleted tasks at the bottom of the to-do list, or the fact that you lost your patience for 10 seconds. And it uses that one deficit to declare the entire day a catastrophic failure.
It's exhausting.
I really want the listener to sit with that for a second.
Oh.
Think about your baseline for a successful day. Are you holding yourself to an impossible standard where 95% compliance still feels like a failing grade? Because if you are willfully blinding yourself to your own inherent value.
And that's where we circle back to that core idea. The more we expect life to be perfect, the harder it becomes to enjoy the life we already have.
Exactly. The source material provides such a beautiful, healing counter-narrative to this. It talks about shifting away from the demand for perfection and learning to appreciate, quote, a heart that is still trying.
A heart that is still trying. It is a profound shift in perspective.
It really is.
It moves the metric of success away from flawless execution and places it entirely on the willingness to engage with the process. It is the core of self-compassion.
And it is so hard to do because the inner critic says trying isn't enough. We need results. To look at yourself in the mirror after a day where you stumbled, where you felt anxious, where you didn't check every box, and to say, I am flawed, I am exhausted, but my heart is still trying, and that is enough.
Yeah.
That feels like putting down a 1,000-pound weight. It is giving yourself permission to just be a biological organism navigating a very confusing universe.
It is the ultimate act of emotional unburdening. But this concept of unburdening, of lowering the expectation and accepting ourselves, it almost always triggers a massive defense mechanism in the high-achieving mind.
Oh, absolutely.
The moment you suggest expecting less, the listener's brain is likely flashing red alert signals.
The immediate panic is like, wait, if I put down the whip, if I stop expecting perfection from myself, won't I just dissolve into a puddle of apathy? If I accept myself exactly as I am, what is my motivation to ever go to the gym, or build my business, or improve my relationships? Expecting less just sounds like a euphemism for giving up.
It is the single biggest misconception regarding mindfulness and the philosophy of acceptance. It is the paradox of surrender. We conflate surrender with passivity. We conflate acceptance with complacency.
Which is a huge mistake.
Massive. But the sources we are drawing from draw an emphatic, bold line between the two. Expecting less does not mean giving up. It does not mean you stop working hard, pursuing goals, or seeking excellence.
So mechanically, how do we separate those two concepts? Because in our culture, ambition and the expectation of a specific result are just completely tangled together.
We have to decouple the effort from the outcome. Psychological flexibility, which is a core component of therapies like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, teaches us that suffering comes from trying to control things outside our locus of control.
The things we literally can't change.
Right. Your effort, your integrity, your daily habits, the way you treat people, those are entirely within your control.
Right. The macroeconomic environment, the opinions of other people, the hidden variables of the universe, those are entirely outside your control.
So ambition is applying maximum effort to what you can control, and rigid expectation is demanding that the universe guarantee a specific result from the things you cannot control.
Exactly. Surrender is not abandoning the goal. Surrender is abandoning the illusion of control over the final outcome.
That is so freeing.
You put in the absolute best effort you can, you take all the necessary steps, but you emotionally detach from the demand that reality must reward you on your exact timeline. Peace is found in that liminal space between profound effort and profound acceptance of uncertainty.
Okay, let's ground this in a metaphor because I want to make sure we were visualizing this correctly. Let's look at two different ways of navigating the world. The mindset of a train conductor versus the mindset of a sailor.
Oh, I love this framing.
Yeah.
Walk us through the cognitive models of both. So a train conductor operates on a paradigm of rigid, linear expectation. The tracks are laid down in advance. The schedule is printed. The conductor expects the environment to perfectly accommodate the journey, right?
Very predictable.
The entire system is built on the assumption of a controlled, predictable environment. But if a massive storm knocks a tree onto the tracks, the train stops.
Right.
The conductor is completely paralyzed. The rigid expectation has been violated, and the journey cannot proceed because the system lacks the flexibility to adapt. The conductor is deeply frustrated because reality didn't adhere to the printed schedule.
That perfectly describes the mental state of someone who has mapped out a rigid 5-year plan.
Exactly.
They lay down the tracks in their mind. Then an unexpected life event occurs. A sudden illness, a massive shift in the industry, a breakup. The tree falls on the tracks.
And they just crash.
Because their emotional stability was entirely dependent on the tracks remaining clear, they don't just experience a setback. They experience a complete psychological derailment. They feel their life is ruined.
Because they expected perfect conditions. Now, compare that to the cognitive model of a master sailor. A sailor operates in an environment of fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
They do not expect the ocean to be predictable.
No, the ocean is chaos.
Exactly. They know the ocean is chaotic, powerful, and utterly indifferent to their plans. But, and this is the critical part, the sailor is not passive.
Right.
The sailor isn't just sitting on the deck letting the current take them wherever it wants, saying, oh, well, I guess I'll just float.
Right. The acceptance of the ocean's chaos does not equal complacency.
Exactly. The sailor is incredibly active. They study the weather charts, they calculate the currents, they meticulously trim the sails, they steer the rudder with immense focus, they have a specific destination in mind, and they apply tremendous skill and effort to get there. They have high ambition, but they have zero expectation that they can control the wind.
They have decoupled their effort from the environmental variables.
Yes. When the wind suddenly shifts or a squall blows in, the sailor doesn't stand on the bow of the ship and yell at the clouds. They don't feel personally betrayed by the barometric pressure.
That would be ridiculous.
It would. They accept the new reality instantly, they adjust the sails, and they find a new angle to keep moving forward. They have surrendered the need to control the weather while maintaining absolute agency over the ship.
That analogy beautifully captures what the source material refers to as living with a softer heart.
A softer heart.
Yeah. A softer heart isn't a weak heart. It is a flexible, resilient heart. It means you engage with life fully, you work passionately, but you stop trying to force the wind to blow in a direction it simply isn't blowing. You stop chasing outcomes that are no longer aligned with reality.
And think about the sheer amount of energy we waste yelling at the wind. When you stop fighting reality, when you stop demanding that your boss be a different person, or that your past was somehow different than it was, you suddenly reclaim a massive reservoir of cognitive and emotional energy. You can use that energy to actually sail the boat.
Which fundamentally transforms the experience of the journey. When you are a train conductor, the journey is just a stressful, white-knuckled waiting room until you reach the destination. The only thing that provides relief is arriving.
Right.
But when you adopt the sailor's mindset, when you accept the inherent uncertainty of the waters, you actually free yourself to find joy in the act of sailing itself. You are no longer living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a future outcome to finally grant you permission to be happy.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of application. Because we have deconstructed the architecture of disappointment, right? We've recognized how expectations ruin relationships and fuel the inner critic. We've redefined surrender as active sailing rather than passive floating.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But if we pull back the rigid blueprints, if we stop waiting for the grand, flawless destination to deliver our happiness, what fills that void? Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. still arrives. Where do we actually find this elusive sense of peace on a random rainy weekday?
This is where we transition from philosophy to neurobiology and daily practice. The final section of our source material focuses on reclaiming the present.
Okay, how do we do that?
The central insight here is that when you dismantle the expectation that happiness requires grand, cinematic, flawless conditions, you begin to realize that profound joy is already continuously available in ordinary, microscopic moments.
It's the shift from waiting for fireworks to learning how to appreciate a candle.
I love that.
The text provides some very specific, tangible examples of these moments, and I think it is worth slowing down to really examine them because they're the exact things we trample over while we are staring at the horizon.
Let's examine the mechanics of these moments. The
Yeah.
first one the text emphasizes is the simple act of a quiet morning with a cup of coffee or tea.
Right, which for most people, morning coffee is purely utilitarian.
It's just fuel.
It is a biological tool to force the nervous system out of sleep so we can sprint into the day's anxieties. We drink it while scrolling through emails, checking the news, mentally rehearsing a difficult meeting. Our body is in the kitchen, but our consciousness is already 3 hours in the future dealing with a crisis that hasn't even happened yet.
We are entirely decoupled from the present moment. But what mindfulness practices teach, and what the source material advocates, is the practice of sensory gating.
Sensory gating.
Yeah, if you deliberately drop the expectation of the future for just 5 minutes and you anchor your attention purely to the sensory input of that moment, the experience transforms entirely.
You actually taste the coffee.
You notice the specific weight and warmth of the ceramic mug. You notice the complex olfactory profile of the roasted beans. You notice the absolute stillness of the house before the chaotic momentum of the day begins.
It stops being fuel and becomes a complete, perfect experience in and of itself.
Or
But we almost always miss it because our rigid script says, drinking coffee isn't an achievement, therefore it doesn't warrant my full presence.
exactly. We devalue the ordinary because it lacks the dopamine spike of the novel or the grand.
The expectation trap, again. The more we expect life to be perfect, the harder it is to enjoy what's right in front of us.
Right. And the text mentions several other anchors to the present, like taking a peaceful walk. And crucially, it doesn't mean a walk where you are obsessively tracking your heart rate on a smartwatch or listening to an audiobook on 2x speed to ensure you are maximizing productivity.
No optimized walks.
No, it means a walk where your only objective is to observe the light filtering through the trees or to feel the temperature of the air.
It also mentions a meaningful conversation. The kind where you are not internally drafting your rebuttal while the other person is speaking or trying to manage their perception of you. You are just sharing space with another consciousness.
Was listening.
A simple meal shared with family. Not a curated, perfectly plated dinner party designed for social media validation, but just a chaotic Tuesday night dinner where someone spills water, but everyone is present and laughing.
Watching a sunset. Receiving a completely unexpected, kind text message from a friend. These events are not rare. They do not require wealth, status, or flawless execution.
They happen all the time.
They are ordinary blessings that occur with astonishing regularity, but they are completely invisible to a mind that is constantly measuring life by what is missing.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we rewire the brain to actually see them? How do we retune our radar to pick up on these subtle frequencies instead of constantly scanning for the giant blips of massive success? The text offers incredibly practical guidance here, centering on the mechanics of gratitude.
Gratitude is often treated as this soft, feel-good buzzword, but neurologically, it is a highly effective cognitive intervention.
It's an active practice.
It is the direct antidote to the habit of comparison. Comparison, as we discussed, is the engine of expectation. If you look at your neighbor's newly renovated house, your brain immediately creates a new blueprint. It says, I expect my house to look like that.
And boom, dopamine deficit.
Right. Gratitude is the conscious disruption of that neural pathway.
It is the brake pedal. When you start spiraling into comparison, gratitude forces you to stop. Look at the house you are currently standing in and acknowledge, this structure keeps me warm. It keeps my family safe. I'm deeply thankful for its presence. You actively redirect your brain's spotlight from the deficit to the surplus.
It is the practice of appreciating what is already present rather than putting your life on layaway.
Putting your life on layaway. Wow.
We have this pervasive, tragic habit of treating our current life as a waiting room for our actual life. We tell ourselves, I will finally relax and enjoy my life when I get the promotion. I will finally be happy when I lose 15 pounds. I will finally feel secure when my portfolio hits a certain number.
It's like we are sitting in the car, refusing to put it in drive, because we are waiting for every single traffic light in the city to turn green at the exact same time.
And the mathematical, harsh reality of human existence is that all the lights are never green simultaneously. There is always a crisis. There is always a stressor. There is always an unresolved issue. If your expectation is that peace can only exist in the absence of problems, you will never, ever experience peace.
You have to find a way to be happy while the lights are red. You have to learn to celebrate the small moments right in the middle of the mess.
Exactly.
Don't wait for the flawless, expensive anniversary trip to celebrate your relationship. Celebrate the fact that you still make each other laugh over a burned dinner on a weeknight. Don't wait until you have achieved your ideal body weight to appreciate your physical form.
Yeah.
Appreciate the astonishing biological miracle that your lungs are pulling oxygen and your legs allowed you to walk today.
The source text builds to a profound synthesis here, a realization that flips our entire cultural narrative on its head. We are told that peace comes from accumulation, from having more control, more success, more perfect outcomes.
But it doesn't.
No, the truth revealed through this framework is entirely the opposite. Peace does not come from having more. Peace begins when you need less to feel whole.
That is the definition of true emotional wealth. True emotional wealth isn't the ability to buy whatever you want or control every outcome. It is the ability to extract profound joy from the simple, quiet moments that are already occurring right in front of you.
Yeah.
It is realizing that the life you have been desperately waiting for is happening right now in the margins of all your grand, stressful plans.
Exactly. When you do the hard psychological work of stripping away those rigid blueprints, when you drop the impossible totalitarian movie scripts you demand your loved ones to act out,
Yeah.
when you silence the crushing, moralizing weight of the inner critic, and when you finally surrender the illusion that you can control the ocean, what you are left with is just the present moment. And the present moment, when it is finally viewed without the distorting, demanding lens of expectation, is almost always enough.
It is enough.
Yeah.
Wow. It really feels like we have traveled a massive intellectual and emotional distance today. We started by looking at how our brains function as prediction machines and how our rigid expectations literally engineer our own dopamine deficits and suffering.
We really unpacked a lot.
We saw how this demand for perfection tires our hearts and damages the people we love by forcing them into static roles.
We confronted the evolutionary mismatch and the harshness of our inner critic, specifically that toxic, pervasive habit of measuring our lives exclusively by the gap, by what is missing.
Which we all do.
And then, I think most importantly, we resolved the paradox of surrender. We realized that expecting less is not laziness. It is psychological flexibility. It is the wisdom of the sailor, adjusting the sails instead of screaming at the wind.
Life becomes so incredibly, significantly lighter when we stop demanding that it be flawless. Because the more we expect life to be perfect, the harder it becomes to enjoy the life we already have.
So true.
We suffer so much less when we stop measuring our days by what we didn't get and start anchoring ourselves in gratitude for the solid ground we are actually standing on.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, we really want to shift the focus from the theoretical back to you, the listener. We want to leave you with a final, lingering thought experiment to carry with you into the rest of your day or your week.
Okay, what's the experiment?
Consider all the rigid mental blueprints we have discussed today. The specific timeline you have for your career, the exact behaviors you demand from your partner, the relentless productivity you require of yourself just to feel worthy.
All those expectations.
Right. If all of those expectations, all of those shoulds were suddenly and completely erased from your mind tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
who would you be without them? What specific parts of your life would you finally be entirely free to enjoy?
Just sit with that question for a while. Who would you be if the blueprint was gone? The answer might be the exact peace you've been looking for. May you find profound joy in the simple, ordinary moments today. May you find immense strength in the practice of acceptance, and may you find true, lasting peace in the radical act of expecting less. Thank you so much for spending this quiet, meaningful time with us. We will catch you on the next deep dive. Take care of yourselves.